looks like most people have joined in. You can go ahead and get started. But a few things, if you have any questions at all during the webinar, please place them in the Q&A window for us to collect. Towards the end of the presentation, our speakers will be able to respond to them. Today's webinar is Overcoming the Challenges of Speech Translation with SPNS. Our speakers today are Arjun Jaggi, Technical Account Manager at SYSTRAN, and Philip Steiger, also Technical Account Manager at SYSTRAN. We're really excited today to discuss with you the innovative technology of speech translation and just show some quick demonstrations and how it can solve some problems for corporations. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Arjun to get us started.
Yep, thank you, CJ, for setting up the stage. Greatly appreciated. Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hope you're doing phenomenal and staying safe. My name is Arjun Jaggi. I'm a technologist with experience in closing key technology deals and delivering innovative solutions to complex problems at all levels within the organization. I'm working in IT from a decade now with federal and Fortune 100 customers and supporting technologies like SAP, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented reality, IoT, and 3D printing. I joined SYSTRAN in March this year as a technical account manager, and my responsibilities in the organization includes pre-sales, post-sales, and technical project management. Now, I would like to introduce to my colleague, Philip. Philip, would you like to give a quick introduction?
Yes, thank you, Arjun. This is Philip Steiger. I've been with SYSTRAN for about 8 years, 8.5. I spoke a couple of languages even before I came here. I love the connection with technology, electrical engineering background, a lot of 3D graphics. I've always been involved with technology, with 3D graphics, with animation, video, multimedia. And so it's great from a translations perspective to see all multimedia of various types to blend in and mix in. So speech translation, you know, you see it in movies, you see it in conferences, you see it in compliance, in surveillance, you see it in communications for rescue missions. There's a need to speak in the microphone and then take it out into another language and translate it. So we'll be happy to share some of the ideas and experiences we've had with that.
Yep, thank you so much, Philip. All right, so now I would like to give you a brief background of SYSTRAN. So SYSTRAN has been a leader in machine translation field now for over 50 years. We provide the highest level of translation quality, facilitating multilingual collaborations and reducing translation costs. SYSTRAN machine translation makes internal and external communication seamless, improving global productivity and international business development. And again, today we are going to be talking about overcoming challenges of speech translation with SPNS. SPNS is SYSTRAN Pure Neural Server. Okay, so today's agenda is we're going to talk about speech translation, the transcriptions. We'll walk you through how you can enable the almost live feature in your SPNS GUI if you are an existing customer. If you're someone new, you would be exposed to a few of the use cases, and probably it's going to be your first time looking at those. And then we'll walk you through ASR. ASR is nothing but automatic speech recognition for recorded audio and speech translation. And then we'll show you a few functionalities with the API and how you can leverage few of the APIs to integrate, to see the versions, to see few languages, and likewise. We'll talk about the futuristic scope and what's there in the box. And then we'll wrap up with the open discussion if you have any comments for us and any questions. So, speech translation. First of all, I take pride in saying that we supported the Apollo mission in 1975. So there were a couple of Russian astronauts in that spaceship with native English speakers. So SYSTRAN solution was utilized to translate, from Russian to English and from English to Russian. So we supported that mission, and at that time, the world was still getting used to technology. It was very new, and we were still there. So like how old we are, and how confident we are with our translation solutions. Okay. What's speech translation? So speech translation is nothing but if you want to translate your audio file or maybe a live audio, so if you want to talk live, and that should be translated to a different language. For example, from Japanese to English, from English to French, and vice versa. And we have a lot of languages which you can translate from speech to text file. One thing you should understand that there is something called as transcription. So transcription is just reproducing the same content. So if you have audio file in Japanese, so when you transcribe that, then it's going to reproduce everything into Japanese in the text format. So you would know what's there in the audio file, right? So we'll talk about live audio. We have the capability of translating live audio if it's in a different language, maybe French to English, and the recorded audio. So the recorded audio files can be in, the file formats can be MP3 and WAV, and we have a couple of solutions to support that as well. You can utilize our SPNS GUI, the graphical interface, to have these translations, and you can also do that through API. Moving on, let's understand almost live audio. So in our SPNS GUI, there is an option which you can enable, which if you can see on your screen on the right-hand side, you can activate the voice recognition. You can set it as enable. If you have access to our SPNS GUI, you can go to the hamburger stat, figure out the translation box, drop it down, and enable your voice recognition. As soon as you do that, this small icon, this speaker icon, will pop up in your on the front screen, where you have where you can do all different sort of translations, like text translation, files, speech, and web. So on the text translation box, you'll see this speaker icon. And now, for example, you want to translate a voice from Spanish to English, and that's a live voice, by the way. So when you click on this icon and you start speaking in Spanish, here we are using Google API. So Google API is going to produce the results here in Spanish. So we are just using that to transcribe. And all the translation is happening within SPNS. So this Spanish text is then going to be translated to English text. So now, if you are afraid, if you are concerned about your security after listening to Google API, we can talk about solutions. We have on-prem capabilities, and that's fully secured. So yeah, in this example, we are translating from Spanish to English, and on the second screen, like here, if you see that, we also show up like the machine translation, which has been used, the profiles which are used to translate from Spanish to English. In this case, is pretty much the same result, both in the use profile and the ESCN, the generic profile. All right. Moving on, speech translation. So speech translation can be utilized in different industry verticals. For example, if someone is giving a TED talk in a regional language in France or in Japan, so the TED talk or the presentation can be translated into English or to any other language in which the audience is comfortable. If there is a movie, in Spanish or maybe in Korean, you can translate that to a different language, or maybe like to English. So there's so many use cases, so many capabilities in different industries, and you can utilize that based on your needs. So yeah, let's talk about enabling speech translation. We learned about how to use live, how you can utilize that live audio feature to do the translation. Now, if you have a recorded file format that can be in MP3 or WAV format, we have partnered with Vocapia and Nuance, to take care of that functionality. There are limitations with every solution. With Vocapia, there is a limitation with Japanese language. They don't support Japanese as of now, but Nuance does that. And the file formats are different. In Vocapia, you can leverage your WAV format, and then in Nuance, you have to have that MP3. And then we are always looking for, partners and vendors. So if you are someone, who has a potential solution, we can definitely talk and brainstorm more on that. And again, these translations can definitely be fixed using our post editor. So we have a post editor which we'll show you in the next screens, and then how you can fix the low, if the audio quality is it's just not that great, you can just fix those translations as well. There are a couple of limitations and performances that totally depend, like on the size of the file, the duration, if it's stereo, mono, the quality. If it's a low quality, you might not get the same results. If it's a high quality audio, everything is going to be seamless and precise. And if multiple people are talking in that audio file in different pitches, so it depends on so many situations. And what sort of basically the hardware you have. Are you using AVX2? If it's you have high-speed processors, what sort of RAM you have at the back end. So there are that all contributes to the overall performance. With translations. All right, so let's understand how you can translate a speech file or an audio file using our GUI, SPNS GUI. So here you see, this is like a click-through slide. You see on the top, we have text translation, file translation, speech translation, and web translation. So today we are talking about speech translation. So if you hit that, it will pop up with what should be your source language, right? And what's going to be the output. So here we selected English as our source language, and we want to translate that to Dutch. So we had a recorded audio file, which was South Korean unemployment rate. And in order to upload that file, you can hit this upload button on the right. As soon as you do that, there is an option to upload the file. Once you do that, it starts transcribing that file, right? Takes a couple of seconds or minutes, depending on the file of the size. And once it's translated, you can hit the wheel icon either to download, edit, or delete that. So if you mistakenly uploaded that file which you didn't want it to translate, you can just take it off from here. Okay, but once it's translated and you downloaded it, the results are going to pop up in a text format. So here you see everything is in Dutch, and the audio file, the original audio file, was in English. And now you might want to edit, you might want to make some changes. You feel like, hey, it's not the appropriate result. It's, I might want to change something here. So you go to the editor mode. Once you hit on edit, it will take you to this post editor mode. So here you see on the left, you see the source. So you see everything is in English. So it's been transcribed. So the audio file, which was in English, it's been transcribed here to English. South Korea unemployment rate rose to an 8-year high in August, the first line. And on the right, you see everything has been translated to Dutch, right? And then if you want to make some changes, you see here we have source, we have the target at the bottom. If you want to make some changes, you can do that to improve the quality. You can validate that. You can create more TMs. You can append to the TM. You can download the TMs. You can do so much. So if that scares you, that's all right. But there is a little bit of a learning curve here. If you are an existing customer and you have not been exposed to the post editor so far, And if your training is due, feel free to reach out to us. We'll walk you through all the features and functionalities and how you can improve the audio translations. And if you're someone new, now you know that you have to learn. If you want to make your translation precise, you can definitely use this post editor. All right. Moving on to APIs, and for that, I would like to invite my coworker Philip, and he'll walk you through the features, functionalities, and how you can leverage different sort of APIs. Over to you, Philip.
Can you hear me all right? Sharing screen now. In 3, 2, 1. All right, let's scroll down. And sure enough, there is a lot to learn, but you may come from an area where you already are very familiar with a number of the concepts and a number of the technologies. Perhaps the most surprising one to me in the GUI for the post editor was the editor for the transcription, because it's very similar to the file translation post editor, except that you can also change the text here. And that's why, because we have a timeline we can scrub through, and you will notice that, oh, I didn't think I heard that. I think it said something else, and so you can change it. And it's a tokenized, token-based editor. So we can go into that if there is any interest in seeing that in more detail in the demo section. But let's first look at the API. What is the API for? Right, it's application programmer interface. That means it's for a programmer. It's somebody who's coding, and so it's when you want to do it right. Use the API to do it yourself, so to speak. Right? You have an API. In fact, you have probably multiple APIs available. You have a transcription engine, a server, a service that you can reach with the API. Each has their own, and there may be differences. If you use ours, it's kind of hiding some of the differences. So it's an interesting way to avoid having to recode, to rewrite some of the code into your program if you're changing from one service provider to another for your transcription. Or you might even have both at the same time. You might have an account with Nuance, for example, because of the Japanese, and you might have an account with Vocapia or some others for other reasons. And as long as you have them available through the same API, it just makes it a little bit easier and streamlines it, less of an effort to maintain it. The other thing too is that you use our API, of course, also to do more than the transcription, right? I mean, we started it not for transcription, we added transcription to it later. Initially, of course, the API is there to translate. That's what we do. So if you have something that you record as audio, or you take it from a file, you transcribe it, and then you're going to have a text that you want to translate. Of course, that's when you also use the API to talk to the SYSTRAN engine. The other things you might do is to perhaps sort the files. You might want to put a lid on it, as I like to say, to put a language identification on it, meaning you have a bunch of files, you don't know in what language they are. Right, so you have the transcription engine able to listen to it and to tell you what language it seems to be. Some of these features will be giving you just one language. That's when you use our API, because in our translation, we will translate from one language when it's on the server directly as a file, for example. But if you need to have a multilingual conversation analyzed, you can use the API from that transcription service to detect what are all the different languages. And depending on the format, you might even extract these sentences that you have after the transcription and analyze them for their language again for us to translate in the proper source language, right? So there's a lot of different ways to get around perhaps what might seem to be a challenge at first. It might not be one click away, maybe 2 or 3 clicks, but it's definitely possible when you code it. The moment you can think of something, you basically solved the solution already. There's other things that we do with API also, or just audio in general. You may have a piece of text, a string, a sentence that's somewhere in the audio, and you want to match it. You want to find where is it in time on the timeline. And you do that for a variety of reasons, like in crime investigation, you want to see when did he say that, right? Or in a movie, you want to put it in at the subtitle at the right moment. Otherwise, it totally kills the story. So you want to find the alignment features, right? And so there's a number of things like that. And the API is documented in a format nowadays nowadays that we call the Swagger format. You need to extend your browser if you want to use it internally in your browser, the Swagger UI extension. Although we also offer these as download from the Translation Resource Store, so you can see them in your TRS if you have the API license, and you'll then be able to actually see it with proper style sheet and formatting. I think I may have one here. Let me just see what that looks like. This is the documentation for, let's see what that would be, for one of the features, and so it might not have the full formatting that you want unless you configure it properly, but you'll see the functionality, the parameter, the structure of the data sets, and so on. And that's typically what the programmers want to get to, probably at one point really quickly and easily. There's also the option to simply take that downloaded zip file, expand it, and go in and open the index file, an HTML page that presents all that functionality. And you'll see on the right side whether a parameter is required or if it's an optional parameter. This one here is for the translation part. It's grouped by different features, right? Different themes, and you have a whole API for your dictionaries, for like glossaries, do not translates, things like that, which you use for customizing and improving the translation. Corpus API is for translation memories of pre-translated sentences that you might say, okay, if I see this, that's how I want to translate it. But there's also one for, of course, the speech API. And so the speech API is a little bit simpler. We have many features in the translation and in many of the others, the SCIM, the activity API to monitor the systems. But the speech is a little bit simpler, and that's actually nice because it gets you to the results really quickly. No need to get confused. You want to get the API that's currently talking, like as your application is talking to the server, you want to make sure you're talking at the same version of the API. So that's a quick feature, usually done in applications that you know might occasionally run on a different server or connect to a different service. So you want to make sure it's still up to date or compatible. Or you might in fact have the software written in such a way that it switches from one set of commands to another structure or data format based on what you detect the API is, right? So it's not just to determine yay or nay, I cannot do that. It's also to say I can do both, but I need to know which one it is I'm talking to. Supported languages, you'll want to find out what languages can I actually query from that server to get it transcribed, right? So sometimes you're connected to a server with just 2 or 3 languages. Sometimes you have the luxury of 20 different languages on that transcription server, and it's important to know where you can actually get something done. Now, sometimes, by the way, the transcription may not happen, but the language detection still can, right? So there is a function to detect the speech languages in a file, and even if you don't have the ability to actually transcribe it, the service that we're talking to, like Nuance, will actually be able to tell you what language it is. It has some limited capability enabled, or maybe the full capability, but it just won't give it to you unless, for transcription that is, unless you buy that particular service, that language. So there's a lot to it that will be very useful as you build up and get ready to transcribe it. And of course, if you know upfront what language it is and what you're talking to, you may not even do that, you may skip it. The transcribed speech is the main function. That's the reason why we do all this. There are others that go beyond it with segmenting them, finding details about it, aligning it, audio with text file. We'll see some examples on that. So here's a very simple example. It's basically the structure of most of the features that you will be using. You have some sort of a protocol you use, HTTP, HTTPS, if you have SSL encryption. You have a domain or an IP address. In my case here, I'm on my local IP. So you have a number of ways to connect to it, maybe a port number you need to identify, and then the actual function, right? This one is in our category of multimodal speech, and this function is to request the API version. It will require an API key, and that's kind of unique. If you've done any API work with us before, you'll notice that some of the features, like getting the API from our translation side, does not require the API key. But for the speech, it does, and the underlying reasons are somewhat, I'm not sure I can really say I know, but to some extent, I suspect it's because it also depends on what else it's talking to. So there's sort of a gateway through us into the transcription service, and we may want to reveal that only if we actually are able to find that transcription service. So what you do is you provide that, and here it is. There's a quick result. The answer is 2.0. So that's basically telling us that we are able to at least connect to it, and we have the right communication channel. The next thing you'll want to do is to find, well, what are the translation, the languages, not translation, but transcription languages, right? So what can we actually do in terms of transcription? What languages? That one also is a simple one, no extra parameters other than the API key. And when you do that, you'll see some output resulting in all sorts of parameters, giving you the language codes, right? So here is something like that, where you'll simply see a list of languages: Arabic, Dutch, or Netherlands, not New Zealand, Netherlands, English, Finnish, French, and so on. So these will, of course, then allow your software to adapt and present options to have a transcription on a file of a particular content type. If you also want to do this, of course, typically you'll do more something like curl commands, whatever you're using, Python, JavaScript, and so on. There's going to be a variety of different ways to communicate with the system. Here's an example just on the command line. If I do a clear command and then paste this, you see it result. So I sent that same command that I had in the slide, and you see it respond. I'm here obviously on that same server that I was just showing here in the screenshot. So here in this particular case, I'm connected to, can somebody guess? Is it Nuance? Is it Vocapia? It probably is Vocapia because I don't see Japanese here. But other than that, it's difficult to tell. And I do know it is Vocapia in this particular case. But I mean, that's the thing you'll need to do before you start transcribing, right? Or even finding the language on an audio file. You will actually not need to say what language you think it is, right? That's what you're trying to find out. So in this call, you're going to say, well, here's a file, here's my audio one, and I'd like to request analysis of that so that it will tell me what's the language, right? So if I do that again in here and simply go like that, it will take a little while. This file is probably 10, 20 seconds, maybe a minute long. And then eventually it will come back and it will tell you, okay, I think it's English. I have a confidence of that. That's almost 100%. Sometimes the words in there might be non-English, so there's something of a uncertainty about it. And that's that. So once you've done that, for sure, you're ready to do a transcription request. Now, that one will return something a little bit more complex. A transcription, you'll give it a file. You need to tell it what language it is. Now, if you use the API from the particular service provider, they may actually have the ability to do auto detection. We don't use it. We don't expect it, because if you're using that through us, most likely you're going to want to translate it. And especially in our web interface, we don't let you do a translation of more than one language at a time. So you need to first analyze or check or know what language it is, do the transcription with that, so it's also better quality. It won't pick the wrong language. Sometimes you have just one sentence with less than 20 characters after transcription. If there's only 2 or 3 words, it might be ambiguous enough. Even something like Latin, cogito ergo sum, sum spells like S-U-M, the sum, and it might think it's English, right? So there is a number of things that you'll want to do right, including specifying the language. When you do that, I'm going to kick this one off just so we can see it. When you do that, it will take a little while. This one is probably going to take about the time of the recording itself. If it's a minute long, it will take a minute. That depends on the settings, though. In Nuance, for example, you have 3 different speed settings. You have a warp speed, which will drop and lose about 30 or 40% of the quality. But you have a standard speed, I forget what the name is, fast maybe, and then the precise mode or the accurate mode. And in the accurate mode, it will play as long as the recording actually is. And it will spend more time analyzing it. And as Arjun indicated, it can also vary by other parameters, such as whether it's mono or stereo, right? If it's stereo, but you have only configured it for a single channel at a time, it will have to analyze both of these either in parallel half speed or one after the other. And it's going to take more time either way. Either way, what you have as the output from a transcription is more than a transcription. You see in the red box up here, the sentences, there were only a few sentences, like, I think I need a bigger box, dude, where's my car? 5 sentences or something like that. And then there's a whole blob of data that actually gives you each word as to not only what it said, but how confident we think we are about having detected the right word. Also, when did it start and when did it end, or how long did that word last? And that's important for other features, right? You want to show it maybe in a cartoon animation, and it needs to be spoken for just 1 second or half a second. While that cartoon character is speaking a few other words, and you want to show it at the right time and for the right duration. So there's a number of different reasons why you have that. At the end, you might see also perhaps a general summary of what languages were found, what confidence overall we had, was it mono or stereo, how many speakers were detected, that sort of things. And before we go to here, let's see. Yep, this one is done now. So we actually see the exact same result here. You see today's a great day for a hike in the forest, and so on. So it took a little while. I didn't actually measure it, but it typically will take about the same time as the duration of the audio, or less if you configure it accordingly and properly. Of course, you don't want to do too much of shortcuts. You don't want to take shortcuts and make it go too fast on the transcription at the cost of losing the quality that could be there if you gave it extra time. Because if you do that, then you're trying to fix it with translation afterwards and going to blame us for the translation, right? You don't want to do that. Here is an example of what else you do with it. You have an audio file and you want to segment it, meaning analyze how many sentences were in there and tell me how long they last. So you could use that, for instance, to show them at the right time and hide them the moment it's over in a subtitle program, right? In a subtitle application. So here it will tell you, as a result of the segmentation or the segmenting process, it will tell you, yep, we found one, we see one person, a male speaking for this duration. The audio might be longer. You see the signal duration is 28 seconds in this case, but the speech duration was 25. Why? Well, because there's probably a second or two before we actually start speaking, and maybe 1 or 2 seconds before we click the off button. And so the file may be longer, 28 seconds, 0.62, but the speech recognized in there was 25. And then it tells you each of those. Right? How long were these sentences? The next step is really the one that connects with as well, and that is to actually go in alignment. And with the alignment, we're talking about 2 files. We have an audio file and we have a text file. I called it Align Me. That text file is maybe something that came out of the speech post editor. Right? We've reviewed the sentences and now I have them properly spelled, punctuation added. If it was missed, some transcription services are better than others. Maybe some noisy background, side effects were cleaned out, and now you have the text you want, but you need to realign it against the audio. That's exactly what that will do. So you give it the audio that was there originally. It may be lousy quality, noisy. It might be too, incomprehensible even sometimes. But after your analysis and your corrections, you know what you want to show. Subtitles, and maybe you'll translate and again show them at the same times. You can get that with the alignment. Speech alignment will essentially give you for each token, when was it starting, when was it done. Right? So it's quite a bit of information there. That's typically what we ask for, though. So it's useful for subtitling. It's also something you might use in, I don't know, criminal investigation, e-discovery, litigations, when you need to show or prove when that particular word was stated, or when somebody said something or didn't say something, stuff like that. Putting it all together, really, why do we do all that? Well, because sometimes you have to, right? You need to get something transcribed and then translated. And if it's not already in a text file, it needs to be transcribed first. Right? So here's an example where we have this audio file and we run it through. This one is an MP3 file, so that would go, for instance, with Vocapia. Nuance only supports WAV files. Vocapia supports WAV also, but the smaller MP3 files. Sometimes you want to be careful because you might lose something in the quality. So make sure it's not too highly compressed, not too low of a bit rate, but it's definitely usable and working. And then what's next, right? You're going to say, well, I did that because I really want to do the next thing, which is to show the text, or I want to show and translate it and show that as well. Interactive chat programs, I mean, audio chat, stuff like that, right? Transcriptions, translation on the same screen. You might do mass transcription and then spot translations. Let's say you have thousands of files that need to be transcribed, and only on occasion do you pick a few to translate, to do some spot checking. So there's a variety of reasons also to do that separately, because you might run some transcriptions that are slower overnight, and then next day in a few minutes you translate them all, right? We know we are fast enough to do that. So future look, I was going to say that in the future we will have 9.7, but as of today, that's a lie. We just released 9.7. This year alone, we've had about 4 or 5 major updates. 9.4, 9.41 was a minor patch or update. There were some hot fixes. 9.5 came around. 9.6 has been out there for about 2 months, 3 months maybe now. And 9.7 as of today. You may want to follow the webinar on that in about 2 weeks by my colleagues in Paris, October 15. It will be very early, 2 a.m. Pacific time. I'll be on it. I'm going on vacation, so but this is something I don't want to miss. You will want to look for it if you're closer to that time zone, and just also for the recording. It's a great set of new features, a lot of security features and enhancements for the big environments. So every once in a while, these updates will include something related to some of the things that interest you, right? It could be speech, ASR. It could be a new ASR engine. Or it could be OCR. It could be, scanning PDF files with the improved higher quality modules, optional features, and so on. Maybe a Dockerless configuration if for security reasons you need that. So there's a variety of reasons why these updates come. Sometimes it's bug fixes. Most of the time it's new features, right? It's a constant evolution of new features. Every once in a while we see a revolution rather than an evolution. And 3 of them, right? I mean, rule-based engines, we were there 52 years ago. Statistical machine translation came around maybe 5-6 years before I joined SYSTRAN. I think SMT is about probably about 15 or 17 years old now. And it came to a screeching halt suddenly 3 years ago when we were in the race to come out with neural machine translation. NMT has revolutionized it once again. The same thing is happening with speech. ASR is going through dramatic changes in the quality. You may have seen some press releases 2-3 years ago where Microsoft focused more on the speech recognition than on the translation side for neural MT. And it does show in excellent cognitive services for their speech translation nowadays, right? If I ask a question, I don't have to say question mark at the end. It adds that because it detects the fact that I'm raising my voice, and it's analyzing what it might be, and it says, this guy's not yelling at me, he's asking a question. And accordingly, you get better punctuations, and according to that, you'll get better understanding by humans, but also better machine translation. So there are a variety of solutions out there. It keeps evolving. Don't assume it's done. Even once you settle for one, keep your eyes open. It will continue to evolve, of course. It's an investment you want to take to the fullest potential, but you want to also see if for particular projects, you might want to go somewhere else. If you remember the good old dictaphones, mini tape-based dictaphones that you took to meetings. Philips was the big name there. And of course, they have also evolved with Speech Live, one of their products. I have not had experience with that, but it's there and well presented on their website. If you do API work, you might use that. You may have it already. AppTech is another one that I would call solid German engineering. They have many languages, many of them in different dialects or regional differences. Go Vivace, I call that the new kid on the block. They have solutions, many of these, by the way, also on-prem. Go Vivace doesn't have many languages yet, but they focus on a number of important things. And if it's the one thing you're looking for, I would say go absolutely check them out as well. They are currently developing a lot of things that will be trend-setting. So what you see also Microsoft has, of course, they do translation also. We like to think you'll want to stay or come to us for even better translation, but their cognitive services for the transcription is pretty darn good. I've experienced it on the Xbox and I liked it. There's a couple of others, don't dismiss them. The big guys are always there because there is a reason. I'd like to just finish with this slide, maybe scrolling this. There's a plethora of places where you can use transcription. It's not only about translation, but in many cases, you also use translation with those, right? You have content, you're training people, you're educating them, you're surveilling, you're in law enforcement. Maybe there are some global events like webcasts, robotics interaction, more and more. Soon enough, we'll see soccer games where the robots are playing against the humans, or maybe even against each other. There is going to be a number of places where you have the spoken word and you want to have it understood, processed, analyzed, and also, of course, just sounded out. And that's one of the things we do actually in the speech translation already, right? If you're looking at just the translation and you are in the GUI, you can have the translation of speech recognize, if you enable that, like Arjun showed you, if you enable the English, it will be translated, in this case, to Spanish. Now, I'm going to a fairly small, but there's a speaker that automatically triggers here as well, so you can have it translated. Down here, you'll see it actually, it didn't translate just one, it translated in multiple profiles, and that's why it took a little extra time. But so there's a lot of different ways to get this going, and you know, let's go to Q&A and see if there are any questions. I think I have just one last slide. There it is. It's the Q&A slide. There it is. And with that, I'd like to give it back to CJ.
Alrighty, so we did get quite a few questions. One of them was, I believe this is for you, Philip. What did you mean by, quote, token-based editor, referring to the place where you could edit the transcription?
Okay, yeah, the token-based. Tokens are used in context in a variety of areas. This is not the security token. This is a word token. Best perhaps if I show it right here, the speech translation. So here is an example of, let me go away with this. So if we go into this one here and I go to the editor, we can see it's been translated. We can see each sentence. In fact, let me disable my headset. So I should be on the speaker. Maybe you can still hear me. And as I play that, and I should probably bring the volume up a little higher. So here's the audio, and as I'm going through it, I will see the sentence that contains that particular phrase along the timeline. And so for each of these sentences, I might see, oh, there's something that I heard different, and I'm pretty sure he said something different. So the file translation, the regular file translation, you can only change the translation. You can post-edit the translation. That one is not a token-based editor. That one is a character. So every single character is its own thing. The token-based editor is what you see on the left side, where you have to actually select a single word at a time. You can go in it and modify it and make it look like individual characters have changed. You can even add multiple words to that. Right? The test, you could say test et verification. You can make it add other punctuations and so on. Everything you do here though starts by you identifying that token. Where do you need to go to make a change? And you might be somewhere in between and say, wait, I need to add a word in between that it missed. Well, just pick one of the tokens and then start editing, inserting in front of that. But once you're in the token, you're basically at a character base for the editor. But this comes to us as tokens from the speech recognition. It's not we creating this. This is what a transcription service usually provides. And in some cases, the better ones will also have periods and question marks and other punctuations like we see in this case. Once you've done your changes, you have a choice to say, well, what's the difference? I just made some changes and you can see them here. And you could restore it if you wanted and change your mind, or you could say, nope, that's perfect. Let's go translate it. So you can refresh here. And then you might even have sentences that were matched in translation memory. Here we don't, we have just the machine translation, but sometimes you will see an exact match or a fuzzy match as well. And you might decide to take that and then do some more further additions and changes. And once you've done everything you want to that translation, sometimes you really don't care about that. You just care about the transcription. You can validate it. Now you have a validated sentence. And at the end of the project, once you have a whole bunch of sentences verified, validated, and they're perfect for your download, you can do that. You get the result with the changes, but you get just that translation. If you also want to download the transcription,
You can do that through the TM. You can download a translation memory. You could say, well, first let's make sure we actually say which sentences we want, like all of them, regardless of maybe if they were transcribed or improved, post-edited or improved. And then you download them, right? And the easiest format to read is a plain text with a tab separation. And so when you do that, you have the text, both of the transcription and the translation. And so you see the English and you see the French. The French is the original, so it starts with that. So that's the token editor, token-based editor. You work with individual tokens before you work on what's in those tokens.
Great. Next question we have is, hello, I have access to the US government instance of SYSTRAN. I believe we have SPNS 9.5.1. Also have a set of WAV files in one of the languages that this license includes. Can I translate those audio docs? Is Vocabia or Nuance included with the license? Or do I need to transcribe externally using an ASR tool and then feed the transcriptions to the SYSTRAN MT engine?
You can really do it both ways. The workflow or the use case will perhaps help dictate, and also the time it takes, and how fast is the transcription service if you have it separate. It is separate anyway, right? On our server, the SPNS, it's not where we do the actual transcription. It's how you channel it through it, and from there it will go to the transcription service, and then internally we'll do the translation. So the transcription is something you set up as a separate server with Nuance, for example, and you can have that on premise. And then once you have that, you can also choices like, well, how many cores you want to use, configure it with memory and CPU cores so that it can go faster if need be. Whatever you have it, once it's configured, you need to configure it so you can use it as its own for transcription outside of us, or if you want to also do the translation at the same time, and you're not necessarily in a rush to do it the absolute fastest way, because it's okay to say, well, let's do the transcription and then do the translation and so on. You can usually get faster results if you go parallel. If you do a transcription, and as soon as you have a few transcribed files, you can send them into a translation and have that in parallel rather than having one after another. Right, so that is something that might help you. Although we actually do a lot of optimizations. The speech recording sessions here might not show how well it's actually organized or structured. But you do have the ability to say, well, let's go with Vocabia or let's go with the others. And whatever you use, it's going to have, you need to configure it there. And if you use the API, there's a separate configuration for the API with our gateway. And then once that's done, you basically can do it both ways. You can say, well, these files I'm going to do one by one because I want to post-edit those, and other files, a whole group of thousands of files, you might just want to put into a loop through your API-based application or theirs. They have usually some web browser interface to say, pick a file, pick a whole folder full of files, pick a zip file or whatever. It will vary from one to another. Do that transcription first, perhaps, and extract the text from that transcription if it's not already presented in the format you want to just send into translation. And then you have a bunch of text files and you simply translate those. That will go really fast. Right, so you can really do that in a number of different ways, and it's probably good to experiment and find it. But the transcription itself has to be first added. Right? Just because you see this option doesn't mean it's actually there. By default, in fact, it's not even enabled. As far as I know, you have to enable it as the administrator. You need to make that one of the role options to say, yes, I want to expose the speech translation because I know it's being configured. So in the roles, there is a number of things that, for instance, I might say I can do everything, including looking at the speech translation. But it can be disabled for some users. It can be enabled for others. And at the end of the day, you may not even use it through the web interface if you find it's more productive for you to first transcribe them and then maybe even do some analysis at that level before you even go to translate them to something else.
Okay.
And the question was if it has a license. So for that, you probably need to check the PO or the agreement you have. If you don't have the license to use Vocabia or Nuance, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll redirect you to the sales team here.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good point. There are many different customers through the U.S. government and a variety of departments. And so I don't know what your particular situation is. This request may already have something like a speech recognition. I suspect not, but I'm not really the expert at that. Every situation is different, so absolutely check with ODNI or whatever the organizations are that that provides you the server that you have, and see if in fact it entitles you to some sort of a transcription. I've not seen that. Usually it's an add-on, but who knows? Maybe you're with a department that actually has that. Either way, it's doable. It's possible.
Okay, and I'm going to squeeze this one last question here. It says, it seems like you're treating speech translation as a pipeline of ASR and MT. Are there not newer methods that treat it as an end-to-end process?
So looking at it at both as a single thing, you know what? That would mean we're going straight to the audio. That's not what we do at this time. Are there solutions that do the speech recognition and immediately really as the same process map that to cognitive or awareness of what it means in the other language? I don't know. There might be, but they probably are still in audio at that point, right? Because you're doing pattern matches of spectral analysis. You're not breaking it down to words necessarily if you're trying to do that solution. If you're breaking it down to words or characters, well, typically sounds, snippets and sound bits, you're going to have a list of candidates. You're going to find a whole bunch of sounds that sound alike, pun intended, and you will want to match those. And at that point, you're typically going to be very close to producing something that is a written form in characters as well. That's usually what we see happening when translation is done for it as well. But yeah, it's a good question. Will there be a way to not do that? I mean, in my brain, it's not. I don't see letters, right? When I translate, my mother tongue is French, and somebody speaks in English, and I try to translate. It's going in and out through the neurons without letters and characters that I'm having to spell. So conceptually, certainly, maybe the next level. Interesting, very intriguing.
Okay, so it looks like that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and Philip and Arjun for presenting. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. Philip, do you want to put in the last slide just so they can see the email address they can contact?
Oh yeah, right here, sorry.
Okay, perfect. So there's a link right there you can check out, and an email if you have any further questions or inquiries. So that should conclude our presentation for today. Arjun or Philip, is there anything else you guys would like to add?
Thank you, everyone. I hope you learned the capabilities of speech translation. If you have any questions, as CJ said, feel free to reach out, and we'll share the needed inputs to solve the problems or the challenges with your speech translation.
Yes, same here. I'm very interested. In fact, we are always looking for other solutions. There are constantly new ones popping up, interesting new technology, new concepts, and it's always good to be aware of them, whether it's something we can integrate or not, whether it's something that we know you want to use. It'd be really interesting. And I would encourage you also to ask these kinds of questions in future webinars, like the one in 2 weeks that our colleagues in Paris have. It's always a good place to get sort of a group discussion going. So thank you very much for joining this one, and I hope to see you on another one soon.